We will now hear more from our expert on SDG 3, good health and well-being.
So let me just step back and think about what it means to have a healthy life and to promote well-being. I would just like to remind our audience of learners that health, under the WHO definition, as you can find in the preamble of its constitution, includes not just physical health and mental health, and it doesn't just mean the absence of disease, but feeling healthy and meeting well-being in the broadest of sense. And I think it's worth noting that in many ways, global health has improved broadly for populations, right? So most countries are on track to meet SDG mortality goals to reduce deaths of children under 5. We have made huge strides in terms of HIV treatment access and to reduce, for example, AIDS-related deaths. But I think, as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic have impeded progress towards ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-beings. And we've also seen a very dramatic drop in vaccinations, in part because of the restrictions on contact and access and shutdowns of health services around the world during the height of the pandemic. So there's two pieces that I think are particularly relevant to trade. First, we have to consider the role of intellectual property in access to medicines and vaccines. And obviously, TRIPS flexibilities could be leveraged to achieve SDG 3 and enhanced, not just to think about vaccines and medicines, but also to include medical equipment and medical devices. You'll recall that during the height of the pandemic, countries had trouble accessing not just, say, as I said, the vaccines, but things like protective personal gear, ventilators, medical equipment that were critical for people who were in ICU. It was difficult even within countries to access even sort of basic infectious disease control measures. So the concern is not just, we can consider these broadly medical countermeasures. And so any flexibilities that can be leveraged under TRIPS, but other trade agreements too would be extremely valuable. Worth reminding this audience that during the height of the pandemic, we saw tremendous vaccine nationalism with the hoarding, not just of vaccines. So, for example, my home country, Canada, purchased enough vaccines for 5 times its population. The US also bought more than enough vaccine for its population. So the hope was that there would be more equitable purchasing and sharing, and that did not come to pass. So it's worth noting that, in fact, last year, 2023, was the 20th anniversary of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. For those of you who are less familiar with the FCTC, it was the first and only treaty ever to have been negotiated under the auspices of the WHO. It's considered a widely successful treaty. In fact, 182 states have acceded to the treaty, which covers about 90% of the world's population. And in fact, a major impetus for the Framework Convention was the tobacco industry's restructuring in the 1980s in response to U.S. litigation, and which enabled tobacco countries to expand their markets, notably into low-income and middle-income countries. So the FCTC provides a legal framework for collective action to counter the health harms of tobacco products. Tobacco has so fallen out of favor in many developing countries that we forget that, in fact, it continues to be a leading cause of death in lower and middle-income countries. And so one of the ways in which the protocol relating to the illicit trade in tobacco becomes relevant is that illicit trade that allows tobacco products to be acquired and to be purchased without taxes, or other tariffs, which would increase the cost and make it cost prohibitive. It allows cheaper products to make its way into the mostly to underage consumers, where individuals can become quickly addicted and then become a lifelong consumer of that product. One of the challenges around illicit tobacco is that it's often part of other illicit trades. So drug smuggling, human trafficking. It's not mom and pop stores who are going over the border and buying tobacco products and selling them in a shop. It really becomes part of a much larger organized trade network. And so I think the FCTC has been very effective in certain domains. For example, around smoke-free environments, regulation of packaging, public awareness of the harms of tobacco, which preceded the FCTC. But it really struggles around the issue of addressing the illicit trade of tobacco. One piece of this is chronic funding shortfalls. Second, a lot of the trade is, of course, cross-border, and that requires huge enforcement mechanisms from borders and customs agencies, law enforcement agencies. So these are not small investments that need to be made, but part of larger efforts to limit smuggling of illicit products into the country.